Yep. All right, I would like to call our meeting to order, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome members of council, administration, our delegations, and those who are watching from the comforts of your home. Welcome to our meeting this evening. I just want to certainly report out that we did have a closed meeting held earlier this afternoon at 4 p.m. and was reported on the public council meeting that we had at 5:30 p.m. So to the members, any disclosure of community interest on the agenda is presented to you this evening. None identified. Thank you very much for that. We'll have that duly noted. Minutes of the regular council meeting, October 26th, and the public council meeting, October 26th, the ZBA 165 Shane Street. Can I have a motion to adopt those minutes? Deputy Mayor Bichetti, Councilor Tonio, any errors or omission on those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Supplementary item that we do need a resolution for the add-on to the supplementary. Councilor Altenhoff and Councilor Houston. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to delegations, and our first delegation this evening is Keith Raysegal. He's in attendance to address any questions from council on the PRS 2021-0 Lakewood Park concession. We are looking for certainly a motion to move the report forward on the agenda, and then I'll call upon our director to summarize and recommendation. Councilor Tonio, Councilor Altenhoff, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. All right, Mr. Anthony.
Okay, good evening, Mayor McNamara, members of council, and certainly we're excited this evening to bring this report forth on the Lakewood Park Food and Beverage Concession RFP award. With COVID-19 and the restrictions on operations of facilities and specifically food facilities, we haven't been able to operate for a couple of years, so we're quite excited, and I'm sure the residents will also bear that excitement. Once again, I would like to first acknowledge the work of Carrie Rice, our manager of special projects, in putting this together. Carrie led the department through the RFP process and also to the agreement with Keith. And I'll address you as Keith so that I don't make any changes to your last name. So in June, Lakewood Park Food and Beverage Concession request was put out for proposal. It was advertised. We received 4 proponents. We shortlisted the 4 proponents down to 2 proponents, and then we undertook an interview process with both proponents to see what they had to offer and what their experiences were. From those meetings, the selection committee did come forth, and Keith was the selected proponent with his proposal. It's quite an exciting proposal. Keith has experience in food concessions industry and similar style venues, one next door in Lakeshore at their waterfront. Keith also plans to update both the interior and the exterior of the building, including fixing the windows to allow for takeout, walk-up. Other updates may include some, a mural on the outside of it to make it look enticing and kind of advertising it to it. It really is going to give something that I think the users of the park can really use, and hopefully our disc golf players again will be able to partner with Keith and make that portion of it very satisfying. So I will turn this quickly to Carrie for a minute and see if Carrie wants to make any further comments before I get to the final portion and provide the recommendations to council. And then certainly Keith would be available for any questions from there. So Carrie, I'll turn to you for a minute if there's anything else you would like to add.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Yes, it was a very exciting opportunity to receive Keith's proposal. He has a lot of plans to bring people to the park. He's looking forward to partnering with the town, the recreation department in particular, for hosting different special events and programs that will encourage people to come to the facility. So we are looking forward to a great partnership moving forward, and there's no doubt that the community is really going to enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay, so I will read forth the recommendations, and then we will allow council, if they have any questions for Keith, to ask those questions. So it is recommended that report PRS 2021-10 Lakewood Park Food and Beverage Concession RFP Award be received, and that the Lakewood Concession Lease Agreement between the town of Tecumseh and Keith, owner of 2759098 Ontario Inc., attached to report PRS 2021-10 be finalized in the form and content to define the roles and responsibilities, fees, duration, and other agreed upon terms to the satisfaction of the town solicitor. And further, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the aforesaid agreement by bylaw when that is completed. I'll turn it back to the mayor for his direction.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Anthony, and also Ms. Rice. Any questions or comments to the proponent or to administration? Councilor Tonio, Councilor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Keith, welcome. Nice to see you again. Just on the renovations, I don't know if Lakewood, the pro shop, is designated historical building yet, but I know there's people would like to see it that. So I just want to make sure your renovations aren't going to be drastic. I think it's just cosmetic. I believe some flooring, fix the windows, things like that, just so we can maintain the historical side of that building since it's been there for so long and part of the golf course for so long. That's all I want to suggest to Keith when he does his renovations, to honor the fact that it is a historical building, and hopefully we can leave it in the pristine look that it has right now, looking as it did in the 20s or so. So thanks, Keith.
If I may too, just to Councilor Toner through the mayor, there is a mural that's going to go on the old, the pro shop part of it, where the snack bar was. So the white area around, Keith, I believe that's what was proposed to make it look, and then the exterior walls of the old pro shop, et cetera, remain the same.
Councilor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you, Keith, thank you very much for your interest and your, I guess from what we're hearing here, very exciting proposal. So I guess we look forward to many exciting things, and some of the engagements, like you said, on pulling people to the park. I know that park is already much used, so you be careful what you wish for, I guess. But we look forward to bringing more people. One point, maybe perhaps to administration, and this is on lines kind of with what Councillor Tonio was noting, the changes that are perhaps proposed to be undertaken. I'm assuming that they will be completed, upon approval, or with the approval of, town staff, town administration, obviously looking through them, making sure that they're conformance to everything that we would expect.
And that is correct. Again, Council Altenhoff through the mayor, most of the renovations are interior to do for food prep service, carpet removal, putting flooring in that's, applicable to food service, sliding windows, so it'll be takeout. So the theme will be the same. The internal will be the renovated portion of it, but the outside of that mural on the two sides of the windows will have the same look. And yes, the agreement does state that any of the renovations do have to be run by administration first and agreed upon before we move forward. So we're both in line with that.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Keith, for all your efforts with this. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, any further questions or comments? Nothing forward. Yeah, Keith, congrats on looking forward to, now at least I got a place I can get something to eat while I, tour the park with the grandkids. So make sure you got a lot of ice cream.
We are excited about it. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And if there's no further questions or comments, then a motion, obviously. We did bring the report forward. And so we look in, Madam Clerk, adoption of the contract. And that's referred in, I believe that'd be in the bylaw.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the recommendations in Mr. Anthony's report, and a bylaw will be coming at a later date once the agreement has received final review by legal services.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Altenhoff, Councillor Tonio, support. No further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Unanimous. Congrats. Okay, we'll move on to our second delegation. We have Mr. Christopher Hales, Chair of our Tecumseh Police Services Board, and our Inspector Glenn Miller of the Essex County, Ontario Provincial Police. And they're here to talk to us about 2022 Police and Police Services Board budget. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Good evening.
Just a point, because we didn't have a lot of time to set up, will my presentation be supported? Perfect by the slides. Thank you very much. Well, okay, so good evening, Your Worship, and members of council. I would like to present our 2022 Police Service and Police Service Board budgets as reviewed and approved by our Police Service Board at our October the 14th, 2021 meeting. Inspector Glenn Miller is here also to offer his thoughts on the service of the department that it provides to our citizens, and to assist me with questions that council may have with respect to operational issues of our OPP service. Next slide, please. So if we look at an environmental scan of policing in Ontario, we know right now that we are still operating under the old Police Services Act of 1990. And although the Community Safety and Policing Act had received its royal assent in March of 2019, we still await the final regulations from the Ministry of the Solicitor General. The main changes that will affect our local policing under that act would be the creation of a detachment-based board, or possibly 2 detachment-based boards in Essex County, as opposed to the 5 contract boards that are present now. We also see the implementation of the community safety and well-being plans, and there will be changes. There will be changes to our police service because of that, but there are no OPP police service no more OPP service contracts under the new act, and so all existing contracts will be null and void, and will go under a service agreement. Next slide, please. So right now, your Tecumseh Police Services Board operates under Section 10 of the Old Police Services Act. And in general terms, this board is responsible for the provision of adequate and effective policing services in the town, and that's defined under the Act. Currently, our board is made up of 5 members by Mayor McNamara and 1 member of council, and that's Deputy Mayor Joe Piketty. I am a community member and appointment, and I am also chair, Chris Hales, and we have 2 provincial appointees from the minister. That's Paul Sweet, he stands as our vice chair, and Mark Gomes. Next slide, please. So for 2022, we know that our 3-year contract with the OPP expires in 2023. However, it may also expire if the Community Safety and Policing Act comes into force. Our budget contains the OPP wage adjustments that their collective agreement had negotiated in 2019, and that runs to the end of 2022. The OPP intends to maintain current levels of service to the town, and we know that there will be some impacts as we get out of the COVID lockdown situation with regard to our board budgets only. And there may be a future impact to our budget if we are required to create an Essex County detachment-based board, and that still is unknown at this time. Next slide, please. So our OPP contract services, the OPP contract is for 3-year term, 2021 to 2023, or when the new Community Safety and Policing Act comes into force. We know that The contract is based on a cost allocation that is split between the base service, and that is basically to maintain a police service within the town. And then also the amount of work they do, which calls for service, the activity level in the town. We know that we have the collective bargaining agreement, a wage increase is a 2% per annum average, and or 2% average, and that the billing reconciliation for 2022 will occur in 2024. We know there's an annual reconciliation of the OPP billing based on the number of actual calls for service as compared to the budgeted number of calls for service. We'll go to the next slide. This will give you an idea of our comparative policing costs for 2020. And you can see that the per capita cost for maintaining our OPP service here in Tecumseh is about $163 per capita. That ranks us number 2 out of this area. We were previously number 3. The cost per household has dropped significantly. And I believe that our detachment commander may have some other thoughts on the cost of policing within our area. You can see if you look, that's fine. And I'm just going to say for your education, you can look down and see what the other municipalities are paying. And we also give reference to where the information has come from. We would note that the crime severity index 2020 for Tecumseh in a crime rate per 100,000 of population is 30.5. That puts us somewhere in the middle of the county. And that crime index, severity index, is a statistic by Stat Canada. It's and I would hope no one asks me to explain it, because it's not something that makes a whole lot of sense to me, but it's there. Next slide, please. So our policing services and related initiatives. So we will beginning to implement the community safety and well-being plan in 2022. And we expect that we are going to have to transition to a detachment-based board. And we don't know yet how long we are going to have all the mandates under COVID that our detachment is going to have to enforce. But these are all kind of the basic drivers of service that we're looking at. The next slide, I'm zooming through this fairly quickly because you have an extensive breakdown of all costs in your budget. And I know that you'll be going over that in greater detail. So, and I know you've got a very busy agenda tonight. As far as our police service board is concerned, we are budgeting this year for $38,403, and that's an increase of about $3,547. Most of that $3,500 increase in professional development is because we are assuming that sometime in 2022, we will be coming out of the COVID lockdown requirements, and our annual general meeting and some of our professional development meetings may be done face-to-face. 2019 forward, we were doing everything online. So there are buried in this some travel costs and some accommodation costs. So that basically that's what we're looking at, is carrying about a $7,200 or I'm sorry, about a $7,200 budget for these meetings. Previous to that, they were about $10,600 because all our meetings, including zone meetings, were held face to face. Next slide, please. And this is the big one. So if you look at our police budgeting. So we are budgeting for revenues out of the police service of about $74,000. And there's a significant decrease of about $98,927. And that is mostly captured in the fact that there's been an enormous decrease in the Ontario specific grants. The way grant money is being handed out by the Ministry of Solicitor General is changing over time. It's not coming directly through our boards. It's going for very specific things. At the current time, our Ontario Provincial Police here in Essex County has got two very large grants, which look at mental health issues with supporting the program that they have for mental health and substance abuse. This is a very important program, and we are proud to say that we piloted this program for the Ontario Provincial Police. It has become a model right across Ontario. This funding supports the hospital support staff that are out on the road with OPP officers to deal with mental health crises at the doorstep and not in the emergency room. So it covers their transportation, phones, computers, training, etc. The actual OPP hours are contained and there's not an upcharge. That is part of the Ontario Police Service to Tecumseh. So this is a very important program, and we are hoping that the grant structure carries this for many years into the future. Finally, we look at a decrease in parking fines. The number that we're placing into the budget really actually more accurately reflects the activity levels of parking enforcement in the town of Tecumseh. So if we go to the next slide, please. The big thing is the cost. We are budgeting for a policing cost in Tecumseh for $3,398,786. And that is a decrease of about 3.26%, about $117,000. So that's I think a good news, because I know that there are a lot of pressures on council right now with regard to this budget. So the gross expenditures were $3,404,000 versus $3,500,000 in 2021, and then this decrease 3.35% reflects a credit of the year 2020 year-end reconciliation of police services, and an overall lower cost per property for both the base service and the calls for service, and the allowance for policing of special events and their wage adjustment in 2022. Next slide, please. So before we go to the questions, I would say that in the appended to this quick report are some basic calls for service statistics, which you can look at your leisure. They just show where the activities are of our police service with regard to calls for service, violent crime, property crime, etc. Okay. At this time, I can't see you, Glenn. We could take this down. Please, Glenn, I ask you to maybe add your comments to this report. We've gone over it very quickly, knowing that in the detailed budget, all this is contained. But I know you have some very specific thoughts you want to share with regard to the police service in the town of Tecumseh.
Yes, good evening, and thank you very much, Chair Hales, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, first of all, for this opportunity. I look forward to this every year, along with Chair Hales. Just in kind of speaking about the cost, just for some comparison purposes, back in 1920, the cost per property and in the town of Tecumseh and elsewhere across Ontario from the OPP, it was $183.23. The cost in 2022 is now down to $172. So you're looking at number of properties around 9,819. So that's where Chair Hales was talking about. This is where there's significant savings that are taking place. And that's something that the OPP had stated that would take place as the cost of policing start to go down. I'm occasionally asked what contributes to the cost of policing in a community. In part, I would say that the population, the technological progression of society, and the economy. When I speak about crime, we know that it occurs when motivated offenders meet with a vulnerable victim in the absence of any capable guardianship. Guardianship is the collaboration that leads to a safe community. Strong collaboration exists within the town of Tecumseh, and it is that linkage in working with the police that is a contributing factor to Tecumseh being a safe community. As a victim-focused and analytically driven organization, we expend significant resources in the town of Tecumseh in the area of sexual violence, domestic violence, illicit drugs, criminal activity, mental health response, property crime, and cyber-related crime. Things that generally affect society the most are generally things that people do not see. We focus year-round on the causal factors of motor vehicle collisions within your community, with our focus being on aggressive driving, impaired driving, distracted driving, and the failure to wear seatbelts. A significant number of our calls for service are not police-related, so we look to identify co-response solutions for non-police-related demands for service. And in one area that Chair Hales was talking about, and it's certainly it's the result of the strong support of the Police Service Board and the members of your community. We have gone and advanced the mental health response unit that we're not calling it, but some are calling it as the Cadillac version. We invest very heavily in this. We have formed some amazing partnerships. We are not the experts in mental health care. However, we have brought those experts into our buildings, into our cruisers, and our officers are certainly have advanced level training. And we're able now to mitigate a lot of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis. We handle a large volume of mental health related calls. What we're able to do is we're able to successfully de-escalate them, allow those individuals to be afforded care within the community and in other areas, and allows our officers then to go and focus on those salient issues that continue to impact your community. So I know that you have in front of you the various kind of calls for service and dealing with crime and property crime and drugs, and you can certainly look at that. We've seen increases, I can tell you, within the last year in relation to domestic and neighbor disputes, noise complaints, trouble with use, thefts from trailers, frauds, trespassing, suspicious vehicles. We continue to respond to all calls for service. We're very fortunate that we have a very robust major crimes unit and a community street crimes unit that address issues within your community. And again, many of those issues are issues that the community does not see. In maintaining our victim-focused approach, we continue to work and will stay with all victims and provide all necessary supports for them for as long as is necessary. Your particular community is policed by individuals who are passionate about your community and take great pride in policing the town of Tecumseh. I know Mayor McNamara has mentioned on several occasions is that the town of Tecumseh is the longest standing contract in the Ontario Provincial Police. We do not take that for granted. Our approach is very strategic in nature. We are prepared for any eventuality that could come our way. And often we have to deal with multiple significant events that are happening at the same time, whether it be within your community or outside. We have the capacity to bring in significant resources. And in many cases, we're able to do that a lot of the time without the community being aware of exactly what is taking place. We move in quickly and we leave just as quickly as well. So it is certainly a privilege on behalf of the men and women, the staff that we have policing your particular community. We've recently welcomed in a number of new policing recruits. So some of the faces that you may have been familiar with to see in your community, you're going to see a number of new faces within your community as well. So they bring in various levels of expertise and knowledge that they've gained in other experiences in life. And we're very fortunate they've chosen a career in policing. So I know the issues that are inherent to your particular community because the Police Service Board discusses those. I did speak, certainly about the traffic issues and speeding and collisions in impaired driving and distracted driving. We continue to bring in significant resources, and we will continue to do that. We operate a number of directed patrols and focused patrols. And we maintain a good carriage and partnership with the town and other community leaders as well, who provide us certainly relevant information. I continue to be concerned about the instances of impaired driving. I think all of us do. I spoke last week, and sadly, our officers continue to arrest a number of individuals for impaired driving, either by alcohol and or by drugs. That continues to be prevalent, and we continue to have a zero tolerance in relation to that. We want your community to be a safe community. This is why we work very hard, and we will continue to work very hard. It matters not what we did yesterday. What matters is what we're going to do tomorrow, and I understand that. So again, I just like to extend my sincere appreciation to the members of the community that are listening, and also to all of you as well that provide to us some direction and sage advice on some of the things that are taking place, and ask for our assistance on that. So with that, Chair Hales, I'll just turn that back to you if I may.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're open for any questions you may have with regard to the budget or any policing issues that are on people's minds now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Hales and Inspector Miller. Any questions or comments on the presentation? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Altenhoff.
Thank you, Worship, and through you, Mr. Hales, Inspector Miller. First off, my appreciation. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening, and to yourselves, to the entire Police Services Board, and to all OPP officers, who have really contributed towards enhancing the safety of our community. Much appreciation, and I think our residents really do appreciate that. As you know, they have certainly some issues near and dear to their heart that I think, like you've indicated, Inspector Miller, they observe more often and thus closer to them. Certainly the crime that you don't see or experience is often, who's going to complain about that? So I think those efforts are greatly appreciated. I'm sure, as you've heard through the Police Services Board, probably the largest concern that I receive from the residents within the Ward 2 area is traffic driving behavior, speeding, and and kind of the related. I know it was articulated a few meetings ago, a personal issue that I experienced about an individual just passing right through a stop sign. So I would encourage you, please. I know that I'd say in the recent past, I believe within the last year, the traffic blitz really. I was amazed as the positive feedback I received from the community members. They send me emails commenting upon how they appreciated that and how they observed kind of the enforcement. So I would encourage you, please, because I didn't see it strongly articulated within the presentation, but if that's something that can perhaps be raised and brought up, on the hierarchy of things or items, I'm quite sure our residents would really appreciate that. Other than that, gentlemen, again, thank you for all your efforts. Best wishes.
Thank you, Councillor. Go ahead. Comments, Inspector?
No, I believe that the council has addressed issues that we do respond to every day, and we do deal with. I think one of the efforts that we're doing, I think, a better job at is, and it's difficult. If you can imagine, sometimes our calls are literally stacked with calls, and the urgency is changing constantly. So we do try to get back to the individuals that request our assistance. In a lot of cases, they do not wish to see us. However, that doesn't take away that we'll continue to put a sustained effort in those areas in order to keep our roads safe for people to enjoy.
Just to add to that, Councillor Altenhoff, the Ontario Provincial Police knows where the speeding lanes are through Tecumseh. We know that the transit routes that people are driving through Tecumseh at speed, and some of the side streets that people tend to cheat on. And the police service board continually talks to the patrol officers to make sure that there's a concentration on those roads. And I think we're starting to see, like you say, the enforcement going up. And so, yeah, we're hoping that we can, one of the problems we do have is that there are transit routes through the town of Tecumseh to get from places to work, to shops, so unfortunately, some people just see that as Tecumseh being an annoyance. They're in the way.
Yeah, I just want to add that it's not only confined to the town of Tecumseh. It seems to be a systemic problem throughout the province. I came back from the Ottawa area and I couldn't believe the speed on the 401. It's everywhere. And I don't know if it's COVID, everybody's in a hurry to try to stay ahead of the virus or whatever, but it seems to be an issue in all of our communities. And I hear it, doesn't matter if it's Leamington or LaSalle or here or Windsor, it seems to be a problem and throughout. So, but I do echo what Councillor Altenhoff said too, is that when you have that traffic group come through, which what I like about them is zero tolerance, and it's there is a calming effect for a few days, thinking, are they still around the corner or not? So anyway, just if they can come in and rotate with our other communities, I know they have but certainly I think it's an effective tool to help keep traffic at bay. Councillor Tonio and then Councillor Houston.
Thank you. With you, Mr. Mayor. I also received the same type of complaints about traffic. However, I think there's some training to be taken here for our citizens to maybe either understand the data that comes from their street. So maybe if we're collecting data from certain streets, maybe the public can receive that information and start to understand that there isn't that many speeders on the road. You know what I mean? The perception could be satisfied for them, and enforcement isn't the only answer. You know what I mean? So maybe we as a town can, as we get this data from our devices that we put on the streets, can that be publicly provided on our website? So our communities can also look at that as some resource in their body in themselves to feel safe on their street, because the data is also showing it, and not just rely that the OPP need to do enforcement to make the street safer.
Just to, for you, Your Worship, so that data is presented to us, average speeds, median speeds, etc. When we're in a public meeting, so that the data probably doesn't get spread to a lot of people, but because it's public data anyway, there would be no issue with us to have that shown on the town's website, not at all.
I can ask our CAO, Ms. Evans, to give us, I think, a report. But I know that Kirby's here, and Kirby picks up all of that information as well. But Ms. Evans.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. Actually, that idea has already been proposed to the town through Staff Sergeant Smith, and we are in conversation with Public Works to see if there's an efficient way to produce a web page of that nature. But I'll defer to Kirby if he wants to comment further.
Through your worship, we do present a report, I believe every January. We do an annual report of the data collection we do with respect to speed on the different streets. I think it's probably been about 3 years we've been presenting that. And the report grows each year as we've added equipment between the speed trailers and then the Black Cat and the Covert. But we do present that report, I believe, January, February-ish. We do prepare a report for council, which is public knowledge. It's not on our website. They have to dig to find it, but yeah, we certainly can work with IT to make it a little easier to put it out there. But yeah, the data is out there, and we do collect it each year.
Yeah, just on that point, I'll go to you, Councillor Dow. I just want to add that the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, through their LAS, have now signed a contract with a supplier of actually photo radar. And as you know, in the community zones, the government has allowed the use of them. And at some point, maybe I could ask administration to investigate with LAS. Those units, as you know, are very costly, but they are there for lease. You could have them for a month, you can have them for 2 months, you can have them for 3 weeks. And in particular times of the year, and those community safety zones, which we have many of them, we could deploy them, and it could help. It's another tool to help our police officers in dealing with other crimes that are of importance, and also to deal with certainly with what Councillor Tonio has just alluded to. So these units would be a testament in terms of where the issues are and so forth. So maybe a little bit of homework through maybe Public Works, to get in contact with LAS on this new opportunity. Councillor Dowie?
I have one more question, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
No
Okay.
problem. And to Inspector Miller, just another, as our officers go into high schools, maybe they could also have a class on proper driving, because I find a lot of people are gotten lazy in their driving that I observed, and accidents or crashes occur because somebody didn't follow the proper rules of the road. So, maybe we can just reinforce that in our high school settings with our community policing officers. So that side. So just a suggestion to you for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dowie?
Well, thank you, Worship, and through you to Mr. Hales and Inspector Miller. Thank you very much for being here. And certainly, one thing I wanted to share with you is actually such a tremendous response that I get whenever I do call non-emergency OPP as number. I believe they're out of Aurelia, but then it's very, very quickly that I get a call back from a local officer, and we have substantial discussions about the particular issue. I've been thoroughly impressed by the professionalism that's been shown. I wanted to relay that to you today. I've had the opportunity to call on behalf of different residents who are looking for an action but are not willing to call themselves, and everyone's been very collaborative. So I certainly want to thank you for that. I did have a question about what you mentioned about the Ontario-specific grants, and I'm hopeful to just understand a bit more about what that reduction is. It was a pretty sizable reduction from the looks of it. And is that the expiration of one-time grants, or is that related to the restructuring that's been going on through the Ontario Provincial Police? Hope you can elaborate a little bit.
I think Margaret made a presentation to the police board with regard to this reduction in the grants, and perhaps Margaret, you could probably put a finer point to it than I could.
Certainly, Chair Hales, I can do that, but I would like to give the inspector an opportunity if he wants to speak to it before myself and elaborate a little bit more on the current program. It's not so much a taking away as a repurposing of the Ontario specific grants, Councillor Dowie. It used to be purposed such that we could apply the grant against our local policing costs. However, the grant has been repositioned in favor of this pilot that Chair Hales spoke to, that the Essex County Detachment was successful in piloting, I believe 2019 to 2022, and it has become quite a model and focuses on mental health and substance abuse. But the costs associated with that program that are related to transportation and administration, and to some extent offsetting the wages of the Hotel du Grace healthcare counselors who ride with the police officers, are what the grant is applied to. That it is not applied to local policing costs. But Inspector Miller, please feel free to add on to that.
That's it.
You would like to.
Yes, actually, you summed it up very well. You
Okay.
did. This is not money that we get from the OPP at all. These are complex business cases that we advance to the ministry. And basically, we're in competition with every other police service and municipality right across Ontario. Because of a success that we've had, Councillor Dowie, they kind of look forward to us putting in for these various grants that we go after. Unfortunately, we wish that some of the money would be allocated towards our cost, towards policing, but it's not, as your CIO just stated. So in this most recent initiative, and we're currently just waiting now to see whether or not we've been approved, they're not giving any money to the OPP. I can't use it for anything like that, but it's going to go towards the salaries of 2 mental health clinicians, that it's going to allow us now to go 7 days a week, and they'll be working on the weekends along with our officers as well. We didn't have that before. So that's going to be a significant investment in the community. But again, this is all additional money that is given to us, but we don't get it. We can't buy a car. I can't buy a computer. I can't buy a paperclip with it. Everything has to go towards those individuals that really have that type of expertise that we have in our cruisers now that we're driving around with. So, and we're going to continue to be aggressive going after that money as well, because as good as I think that we're doing now, we're continuing to assess and reassess different things of how we should deal with these particular issues, because they will never go away. We will continue to deal with these issues for years and years to come. We always have, but we're dealing with it in a better way. And you've heard me being quoted before. This particular program, which is supported by all of you, saves lives. It saves lives of the individuals and some residents in the town of Tecumseh.
Yeah, it's absolutely the right focus for what's going on. When a person is in a mental health crisis, it's the right focus to have a clinician show up that can do that assessment at the door front, and supported by a non-uniformed OPP officer, so that there's not that stressor added to the person in mental health crisis to look at someone in a flak jacket that's carrying a gun and all that. So it's just absolutely the right way. And we've had tremendous support from Glenn and his team, and I know that he's doing his darndest to support on the OPP side these programs, even if they're not specifically funded by the ministry. So he's to be applauded, and actually the entire Essex detachment is to be applauded for that.
Okay, any further questions? Yeah, go ahead, supplementary, Councillor Dowie.
Well, thank you, Worship, and really just more of a comment I wanted to relay. I would echo what my colleagues have said about our residents' priorities. They would really love to see more of a presence as a deterrent for speeding in the neighborhoods. I know it's certainly one of the top issues that is relayed to me. And ultimately, I know that the numbers don't lie. There's certainly tickets being given out, but that sense that that's not happening is out there. And just, I know it's certainly not unique to us, but just I'll leave it with you, and that it remains, and ideally we'll find find a way to get there, so that perception does change a little bit.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Your Worship. And my question, I'm not sure to Chair Hales or Inspector Miller, really around the calls for service, as we see calls for service impact our budget in the final number by about 49%. We do see 2019 over 2020, roughly a 30% drop, which certainly helps in the overall number. And I'll take a guess that the pandemic may have had an impact on what those calls for service are, but just seeing the trajectory from 2016 to 2019 continually rose. Last year, considerable drop. Just wondering some context to that drop? What really influenced the calls for service to drop so dramatically? And, do we expect to see that pick up again? Because again, that will certainly impact our budget.
Yeah, thank you very much, Counselor. And I'm sure that the mayor would probably like to answer this because I think he has the answer to this as well. The reason for the drop is in a large part because of the mayor and members of the Police Service Board wrote a letter to the OPP, and it created a conversation piece right across all of Ontario. So the reason for the decrease that we're seeing, and we certainly hope that continues, is that the hundreds or thousands of calls, 911 calls, dropped calls that we get, that's now being mitigated through our communication center. So the officers now are not being dispatched and having to go to all these different type of calls, which of course there was a charge for all of that. So that's all being kind of mitigated, and in a lot of cases, the calls are dropping there, by the rate of 1,000 to 1,500 calls. Certainly, I know in 2020. So when you remove the 911 calls from the equation, there's a significant decrease. And while it's not as dramatic, perhaps this past year, because people can't go anywhere, they're at home, we're still seeing that drop. So we're keeping the officers focused to the areas of the community that you want us to be in. And we're not chasing around a dropped call that we were before, because that was just absolutely continually. And you're not being charged for that as well. So that is significant amount of, it's about a 30% drop actually in calls directly to that.
Just to supplement that, pocket dials, it was a hue and cry from the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, AMO, and your mayor. And so we were when we started discussing it in earnest, I think his worship had enough, and he said, let's write a letter. And it got read and heard. So I think supported by several associations who were also at the same time writing letters. So yeah. It's, it's someone who can just analyze the call at a call center as opposed to sending out a car. It's just a tremendous, opportunity to save money.
Well, certainly thank you for that. I will say the mayor did not put me up to asking that question. It was, and I do recall us having that conversation about the 911 calls. So, but I do appreciate the information.
Yep, just to give you a provincial wide, I remember doing a little bit of math on that one. It actually was costing, all of the 323 jurisdiction plus the Section 31s, $55 million a year. So when they realize everybody, so kudos to Tecumseh. It's one that we can put a feather on in our, certainly in our cap, but we need to thank the OPP and for managing the missed dials after the fact and the
being receptive. Yeah, being receptive.
You have to be receptive, and the minister, Solicitor General, was very couldn't believe it in terms of the numbers, but. All right. Any further questions or comments? Having heard none, then a motion to receive the report from Chair Hales and Inspector Miller to be added to the 2022 budget deliberations, moved by Deputy Mayor Keddy, supported by Councillor Jobin. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your indulgence this evening. Thank you for your patience. We were a little over time, but we had quite a bit on our plate tonight. But
absolutely,
your patience.
And just so the council knows very quickly, it's our honor to come here. We get wound up a little bit. We were sitting at the start. It's like the Kentucky Derby. If you put the thoroughbreds in the starting gate too long, you get a lot of false starts. So I'm very glad that we kind of ran through it a little bit, but it's always a pleasure for us to present to you things that are near and dear to our hearts. You've got a very good police service board who really pays attention. I think Inspector Miller will attest to that, that it's a good police service board to ask good questions and expect proper answers. So we're thrilled to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Hales. So with that, I bid you good night, but you're more than welcome to stay on and then enjoy the rest of the proceedings if you wish. But anyway, thank you so much.
Good evening.
All right, and now I'll call upon our CAO, Margaret Myzik Evans, and Mr. Kitsos, our Director of Financial Services and Chief Financial Officer, and Ms. Vizikruna, our Deputy Treasurer, to bring forward the 2022 proposed budget.
Thank you, Mayor McNamara and Council. So we'll try to explain this budget that is our draft budget quickly and efficiently given the time, but there's a lot to cover, so we'll move it right along. So next slide, please. So I'll provide the first dozen slides or so overview, which really is forward-looking and gives council a glimpse into what is on the plan for 2022. And beyond that, Tom will take over as the treasurer and deputy treasurer with Zora to provide the detail. I must at this moment in time just advise council of the tremendous effort that goes into preparing this budget, particularly in the finance department with Tom and Zora's leadership, but across the entire organization as we try to put forward a draft budget that's workable for council, recognizing that there's still some refinement to go, but I believe that it is certainly reflective of council's priorities. Next slide, please. Speaking of which, the priorities that have been set out by council in this term of office are reflected in the strategic plan, and they revolve around smart growth, sustainable infrastructure, community health and wellness, continuous improvement, and good governance. So we have tried to tie our objectives to those strategic priorities going forward, and they certainly are reflected in each of the strategic plan report outs that we have conducted thus far in the term. Next slide, please. So I do want to draw the attention, this is a kind of a centerpiece for accomplishments in 2021, and going forward, we'll make some changes to the organization. Council gave direction that we would do an organizational review. One hasn't been done for the town in well over a decade. And so it was time to have a look at the organization to determine its effectiveness at serving the community's needs now and into the future. And as such, we were able to retain the assistance of KPMG consultants. We were able to use some offsetting funds from the Municipal Modernization Fund that was allocated to council to the town of Tecumseh in 2019 to offset the costs of this undertaking. And we have linked this undertaking to council's strategic priorities of continuous improvement with a special focus on customer service, smart growth and economic development, and sustainable infrastructure. So these are the three priorities that this particular organizational review focuses in on. The review was completed in June, and council direction was given in July to proceed with implementation of the findings over the next few years between 2022 to 2024. Next slide, please. A flyover of the findings is as follows. The comparator analysis was done between Tecumseh and some high-performing municipalities of similar size and structure. When you go to compare yourself, you obviously want to have the same kind of asset mix and service delivery mix, but you also want to compare yourself to municipalities that are performing well and that have a good track record. So we selected a subset of municipalities, including a couple of local ones, but then ones a little further away, but not in the GTA, because we had to keep it, comparable to this geographic area. We find that we have strong financial performance. Tecumseh's financials are in good order on such metrics as debt levels and reserves, and we are a high performer there. With respect to staffing, relative to the comparators, Tecumseh staffing levels are below benchmark levels. The recommended staffing enhancements that came out of the review will address certain shortfalls. However, even after all that is said and done, we will continue to be below average after implementation. Competitive service delivery, we perform well on service delivery relative to our comparables, but there are areas that require further analysis, such as in our payroll administration and clerks, as a couple of examples. And then specific attention was given to customer service with restructuring to a customer-centric model. So there were concerns with respect to how the town was delivering on customer service, and these have been addressed specifically through the organizational review. Next slide, please. So this provides a very high level depiction of the organizational chart with the departments. There are technically 7 departments. The Director of People and Culture is part of the Chief Administrative Officer's office, not a separate department, but it is a separated function. And that follows and flows from the 2020 Human Resources Service Delivery Review that recommended that it was time for Tecumseh to unbundle that as a separate function within the organization, as it was previously delivered through our town clerk and Director of Corporate Services. So we have all of our departments that have been, some of them have had their names adjusted a little bit to reflect some new responsibilities and a change in what service bundles they are responsible for. Some have stayed the same, such as Director of Financial Services and CFO. The Director of Technology and Client Services is now looking after technology, of course, IT, all things IT, communications, and customer service inside and outside the organization. Director of Community and Recreation Services largely stays the same. However, it did have some internal restructuring to better balance the positions with the services that are offered, and a specific focus added to this department for energy management and conservation, which in the era of climate change is a necessary thing for us to address. The Director of People and Culture, as I've mentioned, reports directly to myself as the Chief Administrative Officer, and will be developing a comprehensive HR strategic plan in 2022, which I'll speak to briefly later. Director of Public Works and Engineering Services is essentially this very similar to how it was prior to the organization, but will take on a more consolidated transportation role, including transit, over the course of the implementation of this organizational review. Director, Legislative Services and Clerk, formerly Director of Corporate Services, is focusing now on the clerk services, council and committee support, all of the clerk duties mandated under the Municipal Act, the elections, of course, risk management and insurance are in that portfolio. Director of Development Services, formerly Director of Planning and Building, is focused in on planning and zoning and all that goes with it, Committee of Adjustment, subdivision, site plan, and the like, community improvement plan, as well as building services and CBO. And added to this portfolio is local economic development. And what comes away eventually, not just yet, but by 2024 will be the transit responsibility, which will go over to Public Works and Engineering Services. And then also noticeably absent from development services is the bylaw enforcement division, which moves into community safety. The director there, community safety and fire chief, will maintain his role with respect to fire and rescue operations, but also takes on compliance and bylaw enforcement as a new role under that umbrella, and will become more active in the area of policing liaison with the OPP. So that's a brief flyover of that organizational chart that was yielded as a result of the 2021 organization review. Next slide, please. I'll now briefly highlight the 2022 objectives of each of the offices. Myself, with the Chief Administrative Office, will be focusing on the organizational review and also the recently completed Information Technology Service Review recommendations for implementation purposes. We're currently conducting an economic development strategy in collaboration with the municipality of Lakeshore, and that is to be completed in 2022 and then presented to council for implementation. Organize and deliver on the 100th anniversary celebration of the town of Tecumseh and its fire service. Initiating and implementing the community safety and well-being plan that was just highlighted in the Police Service Board presentation, as well as the transition to the OPP detachment board model. As council is aware, there's the plan is to switch to two detachment boards in the Essex County area, with Tecumseh joining Lakeshore and Essex to form the northerly OPP detachment board. And then the support for the 2022 customer satisfaction survey, which is anticipated to be underway next fall. Next slide, please. For people and culture, so this is our new handle for human resources. The goals there are to conduct pay equity maintenance for various QP locals. This next bullet is, it doesn't quite represent properly. It should say undertake collective bargaining for one QP local and also for the Tecumseh Fire Association. So those two union groups and association will be bargaining into 2022. Develop and implement a phased human resources strategic plan for the town. So that's setting the foundation for the human resource service within the town, and conduct an employee health, safety and wellness audit. Next slide, please. For legislative services and clerk, the big one for 2022 will be to conduct the 2022 municipal and school board elections. As mentioned, we're currently undertaking a clerk's department business optimization service review, so completing and implementing that at council's direction. Implementing the webcasting and closed captioning of council and committee meetings going forward. Also looking at our records and information management services through a review, and reporting out on our urban hen licensing pilot program. Next slide, please. Financial services, lots of goodies there with respect to the town's assets and finances, completion of the water and wastewater rate study. Also, the asset management plan financial model requires updating, doing the business process optimization for the payroll process. Our budget software enhancement will get underway, as well as our purchasing bylaw and policy 5-year review and update. Our annual pursuit of the GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, and then also administering several grants that we have been fortunate enough to receive through the provincial and federal governments. Next slide. Technology and client services has a long list of things to do. That these are mainly stemming out of the IT service review, as well as the organizational review. So the big ones in this list are to complete a business continuity and disaster recovery plan in this age of heightened cybersecurity concern. These are necessary to have in place in the event of an incident. We are also preparing a digital strategy for the town. And then there are some kind of meat and potatoes in the IT world, virtual server and networking upgrades, additional public wireless hotspots where we can, advocating for rural broadband, and launching an open data portal. And then another large one from the org review is implementing the new customer service model, as well as then undertaking the customer service survey in 22. With respect to community safety, they too will be supporting the celebration events for the town and the Tecumseh Fire Service's 100th anniversary, which coincide happily in 1 year. Incorporating the new high water rescue vehicle into the department fleet and undertaking training for its use. Some big ones that are coming up for the department are undertaking a mandatory community risk assessment, which we are mandated to do, and the fire master plan, which has not been reviewed in I believe over 10 years. We will also be conducting an update of the Town of Tecumseh Emergency Response Plan and exploring some grants and sponsorship opportunities to refurbish the 1942 fire truck. And next slide for development services, some planning studies that are underway and to complete the Tecumseh Hamlet secondary plan and incorporate that into the town official plan, which would facilitate and help facilitate growth in the old Tecumseh Hamlet area. Initiate the Old Castle Hamlet special planning study. Complete the detailed design for the Tecumseh Road Main Street streetscape master plan. New comprehensive zoning bylaw to get underway. Continue with the implementation of the very successful Tecumseh Road Community Improvement Plan. Deliver on the on-demand transit one-year pilot, and take a pivotal role in the Tecumseh Lakeshore Economic Development Strategy. And community recreation services. So back to, and Tom will speak about this more in the main presentation, returning to full sort of pre-COVID operations and events, reintroducing several recreational day camps and full pool programming, implementing the recently completed update to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, planning for a splash pad and outdoor washroom facility for Lakewood Park, developing a plan to update the town's library facility, implementing upgrades to the grandstands, field lighting and turf for the baseball field at Lacoste Park, and designing and constructing a new artificial infield at McAuliffe Baseball Field. All of these hopefully with the support of our partners, as well as completing the new pickleball complex at Lacoste Park, also with the support of our community partners. So some exciting projects there. And then bringing up the rear, Public Works and Engineering Services, preparing a cost recovery bylaw for the 8th concession sanitary service area. Carry on with that. Finalizing the sanitary sewer model update, continuing the installation of local sanitary sewers in the Old Castle Hamlet settlement area, continuing the sanitary sewer rehabilitation program to eliminate inflow and infiltration into the town's sanitary sewer system, investigating options for townwide snow removal on sidewalks, undertaking many capital projects, focusing on those with secured federal and/or provincial funding, and there are many, completing the shoreline management plan, and also the stormwater rates studies. So a busy year for Public Works as well. Next slide. So at this point, I will turn it over to Tom and Zora to take you through the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Mark, and good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm pleased to be here tonight with our Deputy Treasurer, Zora Visakruna. We'll be presenting the financial components of the proposed budget tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to extend thanks to our CAO, our senior management team and managers for their contributions towards the process and output, and to the Financial Services Department, where for many, including Nick, Kim, Janie, Mary Lou, this has been they've been fully occupied with this exercise. Pardon me. And in particular, thanks to Zora for her efforts in the process, the completion of the document, and helping to ensure that we made our timetable. Next slide, please. So the 2022 budget is an electronic document, as has been in the past. It will be available at the town's website for noon tomorrow, November 10th. The budget document follows our traditional format, having 8 sections in total. It is a large document. It does contain a lot of information. For those who may be interested in viewing, but don't have the time to go through it all, we do encourage viewing the executive summary, which provides budget highlights, summary financials, and estimated impact to an average household's property tax bill. I'd like to point out one item here, and that's section 4, recommended new staffing enhancements. So the most significant item in the 2022 budget, as referenced earlier, is phase 1 implementation of the organizational review, which recommends staffing enhancements. Those recommendations have been summarized in one RNSC form. And with that, I will turn it over to Zora, who will present the next few slides.
The 2022 proposed budget requires a municipal general tax levy of $26.1 million, which is an increase of $1 million or 4.1% from the 2021 approved tax levy. When assessment growth of $250,000 is factored in, the net levy increase is 3.1%. The average residential property assessed at $250,000 will see a $79 or 4.25% increase to the municipal portion of their tax levy. At the time of budget development, the consolidated levy increase was estimated at 2.81%. The county estimated levies based on the past several years, and the education levy is assumed unchanged. For the average home assessed at $250,000, this would mean a $97 increase in annual property taxes. $79 of that $97 would be towards the municipal levy, the remainder towards the county levy. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ontario government has once again postponed the 2020 assessment update. They have indicated that property assessments for the 2022 property tax year will continue to be based on the fully phased in January 1st, 2016 current values. This means that a property assessment for 2022 will be the same as the 2021 tax year, assuming no changes to the property, of course. Next slide. This slide gives a good visual of the budget process, a process that from beginning to end spans a period of 3 months. This year, we kept with our normal budget development timelines, starting in mid-September, with tabling and deliberations in November and potential adoption in December. Next slide. The initial first draft budget resulted in a 6.7% increase to the municipal tax levy. CAO review sessions brought the increase down to 3.1% net of growth through expenditure cuts or deferrals, additional revenue recognition, and transfers from reserves for one-time items. Deliberations have been set for November 16th with an opportunity to adopt on December 14th. The budget development process for the department requested budgets includes 2 outlook years, 2023 and 2024. Finance then projects outward an additional 2 years to produce a 5-year municipal levy projection. Outlook years include known or likely budget drivers and inflationary increases for certain revenue and expenditure types. The projection is broken out into 3 major budget driver categories: operational drivers, life cycle capital drivers, and assessment growth. And for reference, 1% is equal to about $250,000. Next slide. This slide shows how we fared to past projections. Past projections have generally been close to actual. During last year's budget process, we had projected a levy increase for 2022 of 2.4%, whereas this year we have landed at 3.1%. Not too far off considering the impacts of the organizational review were unknown at the time. Some benefits of incorporating this practice in our budget process are it keeps the focus on longer term goals and objectives of council, and it quickly highlights the impact to future year levies of current year budget decisions. Next slide. This slide shows the annual percentage change to the residential base tax rate for the past several years. This has not been something we typically highlight, as our focus during the budget process is on the service delivery and the impact to the levy in actual dollars. The tax rate is really the end result of that calculation. However, many levying bodies refer to this measure, so it results in some confusion about what is actually happening with taxes. So with this chart, there are two distinct features. 2012 to 2013, where Tecumseh's annual rate change far surpassed that of the Essex County average. And the factors at that time were negative assessment growth, high industrial vacancy rebates, a large number of appeals, large number of write-offs, minimal development activity, and OPP costs that were 25% of the annual levy. However, when you look past those couple of years, the town's rate increase has been below that of the average of the other lower tiers. We even had a period of 5 years where the annual rate change was less than 0%. Next slide, please. Turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Laura. So with this budget, there are some dominant themes. 3 of them are listed here. The first being the return of our budget formulation to represent normal full capacity operations. So we had developed our 2021 budget with consideration of COVID-19 impacts to revenues and expenditures as one-time events within our budget. So those have reversed for 2022, essentially returning our starting base to that of the 2020 budget. The next item, which is the most dominant of the themes listed here, is the implementation of the recommendations from the town's organizational review. The implementation plan is phased over a 3-year period from 2022 to 2024. Phase 1 of the plan included in this budget is by far the most impactful, both from an operational perspective and budgeting perspective. We have some slides dedicated to these 2 themes following in just a moment, but I'll speak to the third theme. And that is with respect to the many operational process reviews, either currently underway, soon to occur, or just recently completed. So each of these operational reviews is intended to improve operations for efficiency and or effectiveness, with designs to achieve our corporate strategic priorities. Of course, the review is just the start. Each review will have recommendations, and those recommendations will be considered for implementation. Work on these reviews and implementation plans will impact operations and budgets for the next several years. The list of reviews includes Human Resources Service Delivery Review, completed in late 2020 and currently in the midst of the recommended implementation plan. Implementation commenced in 2021 and will continue into 2022. The IT Service Delivery Review was completed in mid-2021 and included recommendations and an implementation plan expected to be carried out over the next 3 years. Implementation commenced in 2021 with the benefit of MMP Intake 2 grant funding, with the initiation of 2 specific program reviews, being the IT Digital Strategy and Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Plan reviews. Those reviews have commenced in late 2021 and will be completed in early 2022. As part of the town's application towards MMP Intake 2 grant funding, the town was also successful with funding to initiate 2 other reviews, that being the Tecumseh and Lakeshore Economic Development Study and the Payroll Process Review. Both these studies have commenced and will complete in early 2022 as well. And the Corporate Services Department has also initiated a Clerk's Process Review and a Records and Information Management Service Review, and each of those carry the same timetable as the previous studies. Next slide, please. So this slide speaks to the return of the budget to normal full capacity operations, and it results in the reversal of specific COVID-19 budget impacts. So we've summarized them on this slide. The 2022 budget gains those revenues that were reduced. However, we also lose revenues by way of transfers from reserves. Important to note is grant funding that was received during 2020 and 2021 specific to COVID relief, most of which was unknown at the time of the 2021 budget development, helped to achieve a 2020 year-end surplus and allowed for transfers to our reserve instead of from our reserve to the extent that had been budgeted. As a result, the town's tax rate stabilization reserve was not required to the extent budgeted and is in position to support potential COVID-19 impacts lingering into 2021 and 2022. The main point with reference to the 2022 budget document is that to be mindful, for the readers to be mindful when comparing 2022 budget against 2020 actual and 2021 projected. In the past, these were always good comparators to highlight budget change. However, that's not necessarily the case this year. Next slide, please. So I have a few slides here with respect to the organizational review. So our CAO has highlighted the recommendations and rationale of the organization review and will focus on the budgetary implementation and funding strategy. All of the recommended staffing changes considered as phase 1 of the review implementation plan are included within one RNSC form. The implementation plan recommended will span the course of 3 years for operational and budgetary considerations. Part year implementations are also considered wherever possible and consistent with the plan so as to help defer the immediate impact to the tax levy. A funding strategy is being proposed that will temporarily reduce our annual increase to the new infrastructure levy and life cycle reserves to minimize the tax rate impact. It's important to note that the 2022 proposed budget does include healthy contributions towards our capital life cycle reserves in the amount of 1.75 million towards the new infrastructure levy and 8.6 million towards life cycle reserves. And the proposed budget does manage to include a $45,000 increase to life cycle. This is a temporary departure from our plan to increase allocations by about $200,000 to each of the nil and life cycle, which would allow the town to reach our annual funding goals for those reserves by around 2025, essentially pushes us out to achieving those goals an extra year or two. Next slide, please. The estimated impact of the general tax levy based on phased implementation and part year starts amounts to approximately $340,000 in 2022. So the funding strategy proposed limits the increase to the life cycle allocations for 2022 to $100,000 and eliminates the planned increase to the new infrastructure levy of $200,000. As can be seen in the table, the effects on the general tax rate can be eliminated by temporary reductions to capital life cycle reserves with some assistance from the town's strategic issues life cycle reserve. The budgetary impacts for years 2023 and 2024 are not as large, and the current funding strategy recommends a return to the roughly $200,000 increase to life cycle and $100,000 increase to the new infrastructure levy. And with the return to increasing these reserves by $200,000 each by 2024. So that's represented in this table as a no reduction to the planned increase. For years 2023 and 2024 to work as planned, there is an assumption of relatively strong assessment growth and continued healthy development activity. Next slide. Two of the recommended staffing increases impact capital operations and our rates services. The addition of a water operator can be absorbed within our existing water rate structure in the immediate timeframe. This addition is timely in that we are in the midst of updating our 2021 water and wastewater rate study, and it can be incorporated over the 10-year planning horizon. The engineering project manager position will support the capital budget and so is recommended to be funded from our capital reserves and reserve funds. We do have an annual allocation to our life cycle new issues reserve. So the funding strategy would not impact life cycle allocations, but would redirect the life cycle new issues allocation to supporting roads and storm life cycle reserves. Water and wastewater reserve funds would fund the portion of this position dedicated to rates supported capital projects. Now I will pass it back to Zora. Thanks.
Outside of the organizational review that Tom has discussed, there are several other key expenditure impacts. $144,000 towards the implementation of the 2020 HR service delivery review. $56,000 towards a staffing enhancement, an additional fire prevention officer, with the budget reflecting a mid-year start. $300,000 towards wages and benefits for contractual increases, as well as wage adjustments resulting from compensation and pay equity reviews. $59,000 towards insurance, which is net of a $20,000 transfer from reserves that was allocated to soften the impact of this increase. Corporate-wide, an increase of 15% to our last year's premiums was budgeted based on an estimate that we were provided. $87,000 towards operations for contractual and inflationary increases. The increase to garbage collection and disposal is about half of this amount. And on a positive note, OPP contract costs have decreased by $119,000, which includes a credit for the 2020 year-end reconciliation and lower costs for base and per service calls. And worth noting, there is a very special event planned for the town in 2022, the 100th anniversary celebration. And for this, there is $286,000 budgeted for this very special occasion, which is offset by grants and reserves, so there is no impact to the tax levy. Next slide, please. On the revenue side, key impacts are $250,000 in assessment growth based on expected development in 2021 in-year growth, an increase to bank revenue, which will have a $50,000 favorable budget impact, and a $96,000 decrease to Ontario-specific grants in the police budget to reflect changes to the provincial community policing grant. And there are a couple of items that could potentially have an impact to the municipal levy. Collective bargaining for QP 702.13 and the Firefighter Association will take place. The outcome of this is unknown. And lottery licensing litigation, this is ongoing, and there is no provision in the budget for a negative outcome. Next slide. Operating budget revenues. No changes here from previous years. Property taxation still makes up 81% of the total revenue. And we have limited ability to generate income outside of taxation. Next slide. As discussed briefly earlier, with the proposed 2022 budget, the average home assessed at $250,000 would pay an additional $97 in property taxes. $79 of that $97 is for the municipal levy. The overall tax rate is expected to increase by approximately 2.81%. With regards to the average home assessment of $250,000, we checked the MPAC analytics for the town, and this amount is still appropriate. Next slide, please. For a comparative with our neighbors, overall, Tecumseh sits second lowest in combined property tax and water and wastewater user rates when calculated for a home with an assessed value of $250,000 and a monthly water usage of 20 cubic meters. Kingsville is at the low end at $4,100, with Windsor at the high end at $6,000. And Tecumseh is just under $4,500. And now I'll turn it back over to Tom, who will discuss our rate supported budgets.
Thanks, Laura. So our rate-supported services include water and wastewater. Our rate-supported budget is based on full cost recovery through user rates. And Tecumseh's rate structure and budget is guided by the town's 2015 water and wastewater rate study. So this study is typically updated every 5 years and was due to be updated in 2020. And that would have guided rates for 2021 to 2025. Due to COVID, the update has been delayed. It is currently in the final stages of development, with completion expected in the first quarter of 2022. That said, we have analyzed our actual results since 2016 against those projected by the 2015 rate study. And as at projected year-end 2021, the town is within 0.5% of those targets per the study. So the 2015 study introduced a strategy to gradually shift our cost recovery mix from 30% of our revenues or fees from fixed charges, to 40%. This shift is gradual and will take many years to complete. Our 2021 study update will continue with that strategy. The continuance of that strategy combined with the actual results of the past 6 years does provide confidence in using the 2015 rate study for recommendations for rate increases for 2022. So as a result for 2022, we do recommend continuance of the strategy, which will increase costs for the average user by about $33 for 2022, which is about a 3.3% increase. This strategy and budget will secure $10.6 million in user fees and supports the full cost recovery of these services. Next slide, please. So this next slide illustrates the performance of our rates services with respect to transfers to reserve funds, which are in line with budget and forecasts and consistent with our strategy and full cost recovery requirements. Next slide. Some of the main items that will impact the wastewater budget in 2022 are in the following years include 8th concession sewer area. So this is a cost recovery bylaw will be created in 2022. Next phases of sanitary extension include County Road 46 Webster Laval phase and the Del Duca Drive phase. And that would leave about 18 phases left to complete. So it's a multi-year project. With respect to flood mitigation measures, the sanitary sewer model update should be complete in 2022. And it is expected to include recommendations for improvements of valuation of $30+ million. And then with the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund 2021 intake, so the town recently submitted application for this grant opportunity. Projects submitted would address areas that have experienced flooding during the major weather events the past 10+ years. Should we be successful, grant funding is up to 40% of costs, which is very good. However, these projects will definitely impact the planning horizon for other public works projects and reserve fund balances. Next slide, please. So with respect to water activities and water main breaks works, so the town will continue with the systematic plan to replace aged and susceptible water mains. The 2021 water main anode program was delayed and will be performed in 2022. This practice has proven successful in reducing the number of breaks. Water main improvements associated with county initiated projects. So there are projects associated with County Roads 42, 43, and 19 that will impact municipal infrastructure. This will require coordinating works with the county. We have a water model update that will occur in 2022. And then there's the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Green Stream 2 2021 intake. So the town recently submitted application for this grant opportunity as well. Projects submitted are in an area experiencing greater than normal water main breaks. This would advance our water main replacement initiative. Next slide, please. So with respect to our capital program and funding strategy, the 2022 budget continues with the town's capital program and funding strategy. So that is budget considers allocations to life cycle and the new infrastructure levy. We are fairly close to our annual funding targets for both life cycle and new infrastructure levy. Funding favors a pay-as-you-go policy versus the use of debt. However, debt is considered for significant long-lived capital investments. Our practice has been to pursue all grant opportunities. And to do that, it is important to have long-term capital plans, healthy capital reserves in order to provide flexibility to comply with grant priorities. And we also have to be mindful of county-initiated projects that impact municipal infrastructure. So recent updates from the county indicate that many of their near-term projects will impact Tecumseh. And of course, having projects shovel ready. So many grant opportunities have short turnaround times. So it is important to have projects shovel ready to take advantage of those grant opportunities when they present themselves. Next slide, please. The 2022 business plan and budget seeks to approve allocations to the capital reserves. So actual council approval for specific capital projects is achieved through department 5-year capital plans. Those plans typically come before council in December, in the time period December through February, and allow council to influence specific capital projects to be undertaken. Within the budget document, departments include projects that they anticipate will be included within their 5-year plans and recommended for 2022. However, council is not being asked to approve the schedules and projects within the budget document. At this point, departments are planning for capital expenditures of approximately $30 million. Some of the major projects anticipated for 2022 are listed on this slide. They include the Scully and St. Mark's Storm Pump Station, PJ Cecile Storm Pump Station, Les Bronx Via Rail improvements, Tecumseh Road Storm and Road improvements, Riverside Drive Trail, County Road 19 water main, County Road 42 and 43 water main and sanitary sewer, and fire aerial truck. Next slide, please. So with respect to our reserves, the budget includes use of approximately $21 million of reserve balances during 2022. About $1 million of that will go to support operations, with the remainder supporting capital expenditures. The tax rate stabilization reserve is our reserve that helps protect against unexpected or one-time budget hits. This is also the reserve we would use in an emergency situation such as an inland flood event. Best practice recommends this to be between 10 to 15% of the municipal levy. That equates to about 3.9 million for us. Our estimated 2022 year-end balance is 3.2 million, and that's prior to any 2021 year-end surplus or deficit transfers. This is also the reserve that is used to fund the ongoing lottery litigation. Our infrastructure reserve continues to grow with expected 2022 year-end balance of about 12.8 million. This reserve is important as it is our main funding source for acquisition of new assets. We've used this reserve to help fund things such as splash pads, lacrosse, pickleball complex, town hall expansion, future needs, including storm pump station enhancements. And we've identified a couple of reserves here that aren't doing as well. And that's, so our stormwater life cycle reserve is highlighted here as it is expected to be in a significant deficit balance. There is some help though. We are using OSIF grant funding towards storm projects to relieve some of the pressure. We have also increased the allocation to this life cycle reserve significantly the past several years. Long-term debt will also be used to help with the funding requirements of the DMAF storm pump stations. And in addition, we are exploring the possibility of introducing stormwater rates. So we also highlight our sanitary sewer development charge reserve fund. So this has a significant deficit balance, which occurred due to investment in infrastructure. So this deficit has reduced the past year and will benefit from development activity. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the budget document will be available at the town's website by noon tomorrow. That's November 10th. Budget deliberations are scheduled for a meeting on November 16th, commencing at 4 o'clock. And potential budget approval could occur as early as the regular council meeting of December 14th. Next slide. So this concludes the presentation. And if there are any questions regarding the process or presentation, administration would be happy to take those now. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, both Tom, Zora, and Margaret, and all of administration. I know you've been diligently working on this since July. I know I saw Zora and some of your staff and yourself, Tom, come in Saturday morning into the office and to deliver this. Obviously, this is just the beginning for us now, council. I know you've been at this administratively for the past 2 to 3 months. Now it's we've got some homework to do, and between now until we really dive into starting into the budget, and it is kind of refreshing in terms of and a reminder of 2 things. Number one, the complexity of all of the requirements to operate the corporation over the course of the year, whether it's on the operational needs and to the capital side of certainly the organization. The second part as well, that there's really, we'll probably see it in reflected in some key areas where we just have absolutely no control. And one of them is on the insurance costs of municipalities have jumped through the roof. As we all know, we're into a real hard market as we speak. The other is the operation of our fleets, whether it's public works, all the divisions, of fire services and so forth. Fuel costs have doubled in almost in price. So 100% increase over the last year. And you can see where inflation rate is running at 4% across Canada on all items. So I can see the stressors and the pressures, and I could see the number crunching and so forth. But so I just wanted to relay those comments, because I do believe it's and I mentioned it to the media today. It's probably one of the hardest budgets. Probably the second hardest. The other one was after the crash in 08 and 09, and the arrears and so forth that we had to deal with. But this is very difficult for us because we're still, we're not out of the woods yet, out of COVID-19. We don't know what the first quarter or second quarter is going to be. We don't know if the provincial government, federal government will still have some resiliency dollars or cover recovery dollars that are going to be made available. Are they going to wean us completely there? And I've seen the other agencies that we fund as well, whether it's public health, social services, social housing through the county. Those numbers are going quite high as well. And I know that the public health alone, the budget, what we are accustomed to is up substantially moving forward 2022. So it is a very difficult year, and we're going to have to do a lot of I think soul searching as we move forward. But I do commend administration, what started off and what is what you've been presenting to us, and it's quite a substantial cut in that regards. But I think we certainly have our work cut out for us in the next few weeks until the budget is completed and under bylaw. So with that, any further questions or any comments from council to administration? Councilor Dowie?
Thank you, Worship, and through you to, I think probably Mr. Kitsos. Thank you for preparing the documents that we have, and certainly I can appreciate how agonizing bringing this forward it would be. And so I guess I'm wondering how good of a handle we have on the long term. Would are a lot of the cost drivers that we're seeing for 2022 permanent that would need to be accounted for in future years in terms of the loss of revenue and the increase in expenditures for our many operations? And I'd say on, kind of beyond the organizational review pressures, but in terms of the regular business that we undertake, the arenas and the swimming pool, et cetera. Wondering if you have a, as close to a crystal ball as possible for what the future may hold on that.
Thank you. And through the mayor to council. So that's a tough question. I will say that with our budget development, we do look forward to the, we ask departments to look out 2 years. And then in finance, we look out an additional 2 years so that we can give projections going out an additional 4 years. Right now, we don't, beyond the implementation of the organizational review, we're not identifying significant drivers. So it is relatively stable, is what we would, how I would summarize it. We have continued, we plan to continue to grow our capital reserves, our capital allocations. So that is an area of strength for the town, and we don't want to lose that. So that is, that's been a driver in the past few years of our increases, but we definitely benefit from that. And it has been noted, we are, in a strong financial position. That said, specifically to your question, we haven't identified any significant drivers of the operational budget. So really, it is a pretty stable outlook outside of the implementation plan of the organizational review.
Thank you very much.
All right, anyone else? All right. So basically, a motion to receive the report presented to us by Mr. Kitsos, Deputy Mayor Joe Becchetti, Councillor Houston. On receipt, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. All right, we'll move on to communications. We have, excuse me, 7 items. Could I have a motion to receive? Councillor Altnoff, Councillor Jobin. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. We have any communications that that council would like to pull out? Hearing none. Excuse me. Okay, we'll move on to communications for action. We have a recommendation, and it's an owner's investment performance recommendation that comes from CUPE. But I would suggest that we refer this to administration seeking support on a municipal council across the province to support a third-party review. Owners should be referred to administration for review and a report back to council. Thank you, Councillor Jobin and Councillor Houston. All in favor? Opposed, if any of that is carried. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to committee minutes. We have the committee minutes of the Tecumseh Business Improvement Area Annual General Meeting and regular board meeting, October 20th. Could I have a motion to receive the report that on Wednesday, October 20th, the minutes of the BIA Improvement Board as were being delivered as members to the members be adopted? Councillor Tonio and Councillor Dowie. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Thank you. No, move on to reports, and I'll call upon our CAO on her report on the 100th anniversary celebration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I'll just provide a brief overview. We do have a program that we would put before council this evening for consideration of approval. If I could have the report up, please. Thank you. As noted in the background, there was a report taken in January of 2021 regarding the establishment of the Mayor's Task Force, and then also identifying or outlining a, you just scroll to the next page, please, Sean, an event plan that we would seek approval of council prior to implementation. And also noted that we would be pursuing community sponsors and apply for available senior government funding opportunities to assist with offsetting the costs. So all of that has been undertaken. If we could just put attachment 1 on the screen for a moment, please. That shows the composition of the Mayor's 100th Anniversary Task Force. So several community members from across the town and covering several different sectors is composed of the Anniversary Task Force, and then a number of support staff that have a role in overseeing the implementation of the task force decisions. And note that the my own office is involved, Director of the Community Safety and Fire Chief, given that it is also the 100th anniversary of the fire service is involved. And then Ms. Rice and Ms. Ebert to support through committee and also the event planning, and the administrative assistant to the mayor and council is also assisting with records management and communications. If we could move along to attachment 2, that shows us the 100th anniversary celebration outline for the main event, which would be Saturday, July 2nd, 2022, through to Monday, July 4th, 2022. So the events that are planned include an opening ceremony, First Nations prayer and blessing, council chambers, mural unveiling, as well as a commissioned Indigenous art piece unveiling. So the mural in chambers will be at the front of chambers, right behind where council is horseshoe is placed, and also soon we will be commissioning an Indigenous art piece as well, which would be placed in a prominent position within town hall. That would be followed by a public walkthrough of municipal buildings and a bike rodeo for people that want to come here through alternative transportation. An agricultural exhibit takes place in the Sandwich South area near Fire Station number 2. And the Sandwich South Historical Society is participating with an open house at that same time. And then there will also be some baseball and soccer activities at Town Center Park, followed by a waterfront parade at Lakewood Park North and fireworks at Lakewood Park South in the evening. Sunday, there would be the Legion mural unveiling, so a large mural being planned for the front of the Legion building on L'Esperance Road. And also that would be followed by a pancake breakfast, and then participation through the Tecumseh Area Historical Society with an open house there for late morning and into the noon hour, followed by a firefighter combat challenge at Fire Station 2 in the afternoon, a St. Clair Beach historical exhibit later in the afternoon into the evening, a bike rally and glow ride in the early evening, and outdoor movie later on that night, both at Optimist Park. And then Monday, final day of the celebration, featuring free recreational swim at the Tecumseh Leisure Pool, the Community Safety Department recognition and a monument. So there is a monument planned for the fallen firefighter in line of duty, and then an Indigenous performance and orchestral musical concert being planned that evening at St. Anne's Church to wrap up the event. So as you can see, a multi-venued, multifaceted, hopefully something for everyone, opportunity to celebrate the town's 100th anniversary, and also marked by significant artistic expressions. The mural in council chambers representing the town's logo, the Indigenous art, also the Legion mural, which is a very large undertaking, as you can imagine, from the front of that building, which would also celebrate the Legion, the very first mayor, who also served in the military, Colonel Poisson, Paul Poisson, and then celebrating also the 100th anniversary of the poppy in that piece of artwork. And then as I mentioned, the sculpture, which will be a monument in front of the Fire Station 1, recognizing the firefighters fallen in the line of duty. So back to the report, if we could please, Sean, the overall anticipated budget for the events and the monuments and artwork is in the order of 191,500, with expected revenues in the order of 127,550. And those would be a combination of grants that we have applied for through the federal government. And a number of sponsorship letters have been put out through the mayor's office. We're still working on adding to sponsor correspondence to raise as much as we can through the grants and the sponsorships. At present time, we're estimating that it would leave an expense in the order of 60,000 for the 2022 budget, without any excluding any staffing costs, with the exception of some minor support through the Community and Recreation Services Department. So this evening, we are asking, if we could go back to the top of the report, please, Sean, for council to receive the report, and then also to approve the proposed agenda that we've reviewed as set out in attachment 2 to this report for the Tecumseh 100th anniversary celebration, which, by the way, has received the approval of the mayor's task force, of course. And further, that the projected expenses be referred to the 2022 budget deliberations. It's been just outlined for you by the CFO. That is my report to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Madam CAO. Any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Bacchetti?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question, maybe to Mark. I'm not sure who can answer this. When we used to have Cornfest, we used to have a lined item budget. I'm trying to put numbers to those items that were explained, and maybe the task force committee does have that lined item in terms of what costs are going where. Maybe for budget, if we can get that provided, would help clarify in terms of the murals, X thousands of dollars and whatnot. I just, based on those 3-day events, I don't see where we're going to have $190,000 of expenses. But again, it's probably buried in there somewhere. So just maybe if we can have that for budget, it'd be appreciated.
Certainly through the mayor to council. Kerry has prepared a line item budget with our grant submissions for assistance with primarily with the murals and the firefighter monument and such, and our expected sponsorships, so we can provide that to council.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Then on the recommendation, moved by Councilor Tonio, supported by Councilor Altenhoff. All in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. legislative services and our clerk, which is the clerk and service 2021-32 Rodent Abatement. So I'll call upon Director Legislative and our clerk, Ms. Moyd, to summarize the report and the recommendation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have a report before you that essentially flows from the direction of council given at the June 22nd Policies and Priorities meeting. As council is aware, we have been receiving some concerns with regards to the presence of rats in the town, and that's primarily in the residential areas over the last 4 to 5 years. So in this report, we have outlined the number of complaints that we've recorded through our customer service requests for the period of time over the years 2017 to 2021. We also know that during the 2022 budget survey, while we did not ask specific questions about rodents, we did hear from 27 respondents, which was 46% of those who commented on the budget, that they would like to see the town provide funding for an abatement program. So an informational report was provided to council in 2017 regarding rodent control. And at that meeting, council approved an enhanced education, or at the September 12th, 2017 meeting, council did approve an enhanced education campaign to assist residents in identifying and protecting property from rodents and greater property standards of enforcement. In addition, council also adopted at that time a bylaw to mandate hard-sided containers for collection of refuse in the urban areas. Our town's website does provide a dedicated page for regarding wildlife and a fact sheet on rodents. And we have also included a page in our Essex-Windsor Solid Waste Authority collection calendar as an educational tool to assist residents on rodent deterrence. We've held 2 public information centers, one in 2018 and 2019 on urban wildlife with representatives from local pest control companies to provide information on their services and to educate residents on deterring wildlife from entering onto residential properties. So earlier this year in January, we did our council did provide us direction to review the recently approved rodent control subsidies in several Ontario municipalities and ask that we report back on the outcomes and deliverables of those subsidy programs in other communities. That report was provided to council at the June 22nd Policies and Priorities meeting. Council may recall that we also had a couple of delegations at that meeting where we heard those residents detailing their experiences with rodents on their respective properties. And council asked that we draft a framework of potential options for rodent control subsidy program and funding for consideration. So as requested by council, we did reach out to a number of area pest control companies and made inquiries about a typical rodent abatement service and learned how they would vary depending on the property and the situation. So essentially, in summary, there would be a pest control technician attending the property to inspect where the rodents are originating from and to lay bait stations in strategic locations on the property. Most companies indicated that they use a bait station blocks, which are a tamper-resistant container designed to hold back block bait on a rod that rodents can gnaw on. And they don't recommend loose bait just for safety reasons for children, pets, and unintended wildlife. They also indicated that they would provide a typical service would provide for a follow-up inspections to rebait those stations, generally on a monthly basis. And depending on the package or the contract with the property owner that was purchased, they would remove the bait stations at the end of that contract. Some of the local pest control companies also provide services to seal areas of cracks of the home where rodents may be entering into their residence. They also indicated that technicians will advise the homeowner on rodent control prevention based on their observations on their property, such as removal of food sources, standing water, clutter that provides living space for rodents. The companies did indicate to us that these abatement programs do need some additional support in order to be successful. They advise that food sources, whether it be on the property owner who they're contracting with or area abutting residents, where there is food sources such as bird feeders, gardens, and compostings, those which are allowable within the municipality, can have an impact on the success or unsuccess of an abatement program. So while that one property owner may be endeavoring to eradicate the rodents from their property, if there are other owners in the area that have these food and shelter resources, eradication may not be possible. Each of the pest control companies offer different packages, and most recommend a minimum of a 3-month duration in order to achieve removal of the rodents. And on average, those types of programs would be $300 to $400 depending on the property. So we also looked at, as council requested, those other Ontario municipalities that have offered rodent abatement programs. Of the 7 municipalities reviewed, City of Windsor was the only program that offered their program free to residents and requires active burrows to be on site for the extermination services. 3 of the 7 municipalities reported that property owners were satisfied with the programs, and uptake is variable, and none of the programs have been in place long enough to establish trends. 2 other municipalities, that being Lincoln and the Region Appeal, began pilot programs earlier this year. So we really don't have any data that we can provide in respect to their programs. And Sault Ste. Marie has discontinued their program primarily due to escalating costs, as the projected increase for 2021 was moving from $25,000 to a $96,000 based on the forecasted projected requests. So all of these municipalities that we consulted do have robust education programs in place on their websites. So as far as options, we can continue. Number 1, we can continue with our enhanced education campaign to assist residents on identifying rodents on their property and how they can deter or remove them. Another option might be to engage in a rodent abatement pilot program, partially subsidized by the town up to 50% of an established limit once per year. We could also look at implementing as a third option, a rodent abatement pilot program for neighborhood areas within a geographically defined area where rodents have been identified as problematic. And as a collective neighborhood, the property owners in the defined area would need to ensure all preventative measures such as removing food and water sources are undertaken in order to participate in the rodent abatement pilot program. So both with options 2 and 3, if one of these options were selected by council, we would develop administration, would develop a proposed program model, process, and regulations, including the limited funding per property per year. And a further report would be brought back to council for consideration and approval prior to implementation. And of course, selection of a local pest company would be through an appropriate procurement process through the town's purchasing policy. So as far as financial implications are concerned, the costs associated with operating a rodent control program vary widely amongst municipalities currently engaged in abatement programs. Programs currently in operation are relatively recent, so trends are not well established in use or cost, and most of those programs do not take into consideration municipal administration costs associated with managing the program, customer service tracking, municipal inspections, and financial transactions. So for the town to offer such a program, it would require a new operating expenditure in the budget, as well as staff support to administer the program and for bylaw enforcement. Based on the local pest control company's advice, the average household abatement program would be in the range of $300 to $400 per property owner. And looking at our comparable municipalities, their budgets range between $15,000 and $20,000 a year. So should council wish to consider introducing a pilot rodent abatement program, we're recommending funding start at $10,000 and be referred to the 2022 budget deliberations, as at this time there is no funding currently allocated in the budget for rodent control. So our recommendation before you is that this report be received and that council provide direction on their preferred option. And should council prefer option 2 or 3, the funding be referred to the 2022 budget deliberations next week.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Moy. Questions or comments? Councilor Dowie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Moy. Thank you for the report and for bringing forward prior to the budget deliberations. Given that the recommendation doesn't give a preference if there was a selected program, I'm hoping you might be able to give maybe a sense of how much staff time would be required for a straight subsidy program versus one that has an intensive investigation at the property and inspection program. Would the subsidy cost less versus having the more? So would option 2 cost less to administer versus option 3?
So option 2 being a discount, a cost sharing arrangement with the residents versus option 3 being fully funded by the town, subject to geographic area. If I'm understanding the question correctly, which would be less staff time to administer?
That's right.
I would suggest to you that it's hard to predict how much staff time would be required. Obviously, there would be involvement of both the financial services department, obviously with regards to the program being administered on a 50% basis. There would be for that program, obviously it would have to be monitored. Either program would have to be monitored. The implementation within a geographic area, again, that would probably take more resources with administration to ensure that there's that geographically defined where that definition is. In short answer, I guess, to your question, Councillor Dowie, it's truly difficult for us to predict how much staff time for either of these options is going to take, given that we've not had experience here in the town. And either program is going to be new to us to administer.
The only thing I would add, Councillor Dowie, the fear that I would have would be, it has to be monitored somehow on the site. As you'd be getting calls from 4 corners of the municipality if somebody thought they saw a rat or and so forth. I think they would have to be. It's going to expend some inspection to make sure that we're not chasing our tail here, and I think that's we'd have to be cognizant of that. Go ahead, Councillor Dowie.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that comment. I think that's looking at number 3, that the higher risk is in that one, because ultimately there's no skin in the game for making the request. And ultimately, if it's more of a shared cost, then okay, well, this is important enough for me to contribute to the solution versus having government take care of it all, which I know we don't, municipal government generally doesn't see this as a municipal responsibility. And so ultimately, I think just my sense is option 2 is going to be the most sustainable and most equitable of the considerations if we were to go ahead with the program. So I'd like to make that recommendation that we pilot out option 2 and refer that to our budget considerations.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Bichetti, you had your second hand, and then Councillor Altenhoff follow.
Yeah, I'm prepared to support that motion by Councillor Dowie. I too agree. Number 2 is our next step here. If you look at the history of rats and trying to go to number 3, we would be looking at we'd have a whole department, rat patrol. And if you look at Alberta, Saskatchewan, back in the 50s, that's what they did. They spent thousands of dollars. If you look at the history of how they've done it, there's a lot of expenses that they did back then and continue to do so. But again, they do have a department, the rat patrols. So for us, again, that would be cost prohibitive in terms of, providing the service. We listen to residents. It is an issue in town, and having us consider number 2 at budget would be a good first step for us to try, and we'll be able to get feedback from the pest control companies that bid for it, and see if it can be improved at an annual basis, and then we can review it to see the success of it. So again, I support the motion.
I saw, Margaret, I saw your hand go up. It is, you got this concerned look.
I do. And Mr. Mayor, if I could, I don't intend to enter the debate, but just for clarity, there was no intention with option 3 that it wouldn't be a cost share arrangement. There would be skin in the game. What we're trying to distinguish between option 2 and option 3 is that there seem to be some areas where the problem is concentrated, and it does take a neighborhood working collectively and cooperatively to actually make a dent in this problem. Option 2, being open to anyone, anywhere in the municipality, if they are acting alone in the neighborhood and there's no regard by the neighbors for open food sources, open water sources, and other things that could attract or harbor rodents, then it really doesn't provide for an efficient use of public funds because there'd be limited efficacy, in my opinion, on the one affected property. Whereas option 3 does require people to work with their neighbors to attempt to mitigate the problem in a geographic area. Those are my thoughts.
And that's a good point, because I'm gonna relay, you don't want to be in a position to chase your tail, a dog chasing the tail. The other thing too that we have to remember, and what I like about number 3 in particular, is the fact that I think we're not the food source, and maybe what we need to be doing as well is reconsidering that pilot program that we've got on hens. It seems that the rat population seems to be migrating around those. And I've engaged the public, not public works, but the building department in the last 2 months quite a bit. And the phone calls have been quite a bit, but it's all not across the town, but specific areas. And lo and behold, it's where the chicken coops are. And we're dealing with one that we're having some issues with, big issues in that regard. So you talk about food source, that's a big issue. And I think, if we're going to deliberate and move into these programs, it's not just adding other dollars and then we've got other, we're contributing to the problem and we're trying to solve the problem and so forth. So I think in the discussions that we have, members of council, I think we should be looking at, maybe I think it's March 22 is the end of the pilot. Maybe we need to advance that. That would be my suggestion.
Well, to your point, Mr. Mayor, that is certainly something that staff has been considering recently, and it's on the agenda for the next council admin meeting to socialize exactly that with yourself and the deputy in order to perhaps approach council earlier than the end of the pilot, because I do believe that we too have concerns with respect to how well that is performing and some of the unintended and unfortunate circumstances around the keeping of hens in an urban area.
Councillor Altenhoff, you were patiently waiting there, and then Councillor Jobin.
Thank you, Worship. And through you, I appreciate the comments that have been made. And as council can be aware, I recall long before this report and so forth, I was an advocate for rodent reduction or trying elimination. So I'm glad to see this, and I thank everyone involved very much for this. I'd like to say, first off, that I think hybrid 2 may become a derivative of hybrid 3. Reason being is I would expect that, if there's an issue, probably other neighbors will get involved. I do like, as how it's worded in the report, option 2, in the sense that it does seem that would be kind of a subsidized program. Thus, municipal dollars would go further. Now, it was indicated that option 3 certainly could be subsidized, but I do like option 2 in the sense that it may give you a broader impact. I think you will always be fighting with some neighbors that really don't want to clean up their area. And certainly we can get bylaw officers after them. But I think option 2, maybe again, it's going to reach out perhaps potentially broader to the community as well. I would also suggest that we also keep option 1. So look at a hybrid of option 1, which I don't think is any cost to us because we're currently doing that anyways. If we can educate our residents, they may never need to get to option 2 or 3. So I would encourage leaving the educational part in there. Then, so a bit of a hybrid of option 1 and option 2, where we keep the educational part in there. If that resolves the problem, then the residents don't have to pay any money. The town doesn't have to pay any money. Our dollars will go further. We'll resolve the issue. If it needs to fall to option 2, where they involve a contractor and like I said, a cost sharing to resolve it, I think that would be most appropriate from my point of view. Thank you.
Councilor Jobin, Councilor Tonio.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, I know I'm chuckling because I know you're all anticipating for me to say something crazy on this subject. I still can't really get my head around it. When I have a WASP problem, I manage and maintain the matter. And if I've traced it back to the neighbor, I would have discussions with my neighbor and or then call the town for property standards by law enforcement. In saying that, how many calls of concern have we gotten this year? Like, I know we had a couple of delegations come out, and the one case was quite extensive, quite disconcerting for sure. But we just keep talking about this mass, and I just need to know how many complaints have we received. And really, any one of these options, it comes down to the same thing: who is going to comply? When we do all this, and we have somebody clean up. What's going to be the long term down the road? We cleaned it up, and who's to say that person's still going to commit if they are the food source? What's the fine to them? Then let's fine them and say, you are now going to pay us all back. I'm going to put it on your taxes to pay us back because you can't maintain your property. I don't know. I just feel like somebody's got to be held accountable as well. Anyway, thanks.
All I can say, Councilor Jobin, I've tried the neighborhood politeness with our inspectors. It is not working on it specifically. So this is why I think we need to look at, the hen issue. I think that is contributing. I can tell you through Messenger, and I'll show them to you, how many I've gotten. And one school. And so there's certainly an issue, and there's been orders issued on some of them, and they haven't complied. And so, we've got to start taking them to court and so forth. So anyway, there are numerous around, but are they across the whole city or the town? No. But are they in specific areas in the community? Yes. And if you trace it back, it's all around where they've got chickens. And I'm not saying that they're the only contributor. I had the issue in my neighbor, not too far from Councilor Tonio, who had about 7 or 8 bird feeders in the yard. And yeah, we had rats. Then they decided not to put bird feeders out, and guess what? They're gone. And so there's no doubt education is so important. We have to continue to do that, but it's to the point too that one is contributing to the other. And I we've got pilots on this side and then we're adding money on this side to try to alleviate the rodent problem. And in the same token is being added on by another pilot that we're that's in place. So that's where I think the discussion, when we make a decision, I think we've got to really reassess. And I'm glad that we did a pilot. It's done or it's underway. But I think we need to really rethink moving forward on that one. Councilor Tony?
Supplementary, sorry. So the report says there was 10 calls of concern, but you're saying since they're not seeing results, they're now calling members of council directly because they want to see more expedited action.
Yeah, now they call them the mayor, instead of their counselors, but I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm a counselor like the rest and so forth, but I've been working with Mr. Jeffrey. I've been working with Mr. Hillman. Prior to that, our inspectors have been on site. I've been there in other areas, even with the chief building official. And so they keep coming. And so this is why I think we're trying to deal with this, moving forward. Councilor Tonio?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I choose 2.5, I guess. As the CAO said, it takes a neighborhood to clean up one person's problem. We're close together here in our community. And our communities are based on each other, talking to each other and communicating what's happening and enjoying each other's company. Same thing, if a neighbor has a rat problem, that could fester to my house and over to the next house. If we don't fix the neighborhood problem on top of helping that resident who's really suffering over, a rat problem, I think would be beneficial. So one or the other two, but 2.5 is my option. Thanks.
Councilor Houston.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I can't say that I have received a ton of calls right on the rat issue, but I did get a couple this summer. So, if they're migrating south, a couple on Westlake did call, and I even put one out in my backyard because one day I saw something. I don't know what it was, but I got a trap, I put it out, and I've got a dog, so it's a contained trap. But the one thing I was wondering, in the report, it mentions going through the purchasing bylaw and contracting with an exterminator. I don't know if we can lean on them a little bit through this process if they're going out and noticing or reporting some of the requirements that need to happen in the yards, if we can partner with them, a little bit through the process, if that may be a little bit of an option, or if there's recommendations that they can give of the right poison or the right trap or a better trap to use. I'm just wondering if we can leverage on them a little bit because I don't know much about rats, but I do know that the poison generally isn't, some of the poison works better than others. So if we can leverage some of that knowledge that they have for residents who may just want to go out and buy a trap themselves, right? And not necessarily contract a full service, but just have something there available. If we can do that, maybe that'll be beneficial as well.
Okay, any further, go ahead, Ms. Moy.
So through you, Your Worship, in response to Councillor Houston, so depending on how we want to frame the request for proposal within the approved program by council, we would certainly be able to include other provisions other than just baiting within the request for proposal for the service provider. Just also to, I guess, reiterate with council that if we're looking at doing an abatement program, we do need a neighborhood cooperation. If one property owner has a rodent abatement, surrounding properties may not necessarily be just a property standards issue. As to the mayor indicated, a bird feeder, having your dog or your other pets that are outside, leaving their food outside and their shelter outside. It could be water sources, ponds, bird baths, anything of that nature, which are all permitted, across most municipalities or any municipalities. Those types of sources will can attract rodents. So unless there is cooperation in removing some of these sources, a program on one property may not be successful if there's other attractions on abutting properties nearby.
Yeah, and it certainly takes, I mean, if you remember a few years back, the feral cat issues we had, until we started that's why we started the neuter program and so forth. It's been quite successful. And that's the other thing too, is that, folks putting food out to, for other animals. That's another attraction. So the education piece has to continue full bore, no question. Councillor Altenhoff?
Thank you, Worship. And through you, again, I really just want to articulate a lot of the points that have been raised here, as you've said, I think can be dealt with through education. And that costs us very little or nothing. So that's option one. So I encourage option one to still be in effect with, whatever. I'm somewhat keen on option two because it can hit, it's a bit broader. Again, it's a subsidized program. So our dollars will go further. And I really think the word will start spreading. If one neighbor's frustrated, the other neighbor's frustrated, the other neighbor's frustrated, they're probably all going to tie into this. Now, you're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. If someone wishes not to comply and I want to leave my backyard to harbor such rodents, then you're going to have to involve bylaw officers and so forth. But I really believe that educational part has to be there. Thank you.
Okay, so can I maybe make a recommendation that we refer the pilot program to the budget deliberation? Councillor Dowie.
Yes, I'm happy. I guess, is that absent an option with that recommendation?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why they gave us the options. I don't think that you want to specify. Do you want to know exactly what we want and then move forward? To me, that's redundant, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, just the report indicated, I took it to be council should give direction. And there wasn't a preference given in the report, option 2 versus 3, but I guess it sounds like the staff would prefer option 3, which was fine. But at the end of the day, it didn't read that way in the report. And secondly, in terms of this may be getting into the weeds, but is the vision that the staff would run a contract versus just having a straight resident pays and then they bring the bill and we give them their 50% back. So anyway, whatever the parameters are, I think it's less relevant than actually having a tool in the toolbox to help with this issue. So I'm happy to just send it to the budget because it's the same amount no matter what. So let's just come up with something to help the residents who are experiencing this.
I think that's certainly my point. I mean, is 2 the best? Is 3 the best? Is 2.5, as Councillor Tonio alluded to, or a combination of 1, 2, and 3, and so forth? I think incorporating some of it, but my biggest piece is I certainly if we don't set parameters on this, the 10,000 will be gone in a matter of a very short period of time. If you open this up everywhere, and that's why I think we need to target the areas where you're actually getting the calls, where these rodents are migrating to, and that would be my biggest concern is if we're gonna do a pilot, I'd like to target it so that, and then inspect it properly so that, again, we're not chasing our tail. And because I think in one of the municipalities, I forget which one, I think it was Sault Ste. Marie, where, you know, they went from about 10 or 15,000 to 25, and they're up to 100,000. And they decided, okay, can't do it anymore. It's just getting out of hand. So the education piece, to your point, Councillor Altenhoff, I think we've got to continue to do that, but I'd rather, you know, refer to the budget, and then, you know, in the meantime, we can do a little bit of work and try to get a little bit more information, but I do tend to agree with the recommendation that the administration brought forward, because I think it's more of a stage approach. Yes, Margaret?
Through the mayor, to try to assist council on this. Perhaps if the matter could be referred to budget, we can kind of regroup on all of the you know, debate that's happened here this evening, and try to find a kind of the compromise model out of the recommendations, recommended options put forward to you know, to come up with a good way forward that makes the best use of the budget commitment.
I like that. Well, I'd have to go to the mover and seconder on if they're okay with that. If you would change with, I got a hard time now, it's getting late, withdraw the motion and then refer it to budget and administration to come back with maybe a bit more refined
Hybrid.
Yep, I'll withdraw this, the second, and
You okay, Councillor Dowie? Okay, and okay, can I get somebody to move that the recommendation, and then Councillor Altenhoff and Councillor Tonio? All in favor?
No, wait, just to defer it. We're not making a decision tonight, right?
No.
Say that again?
It's going to budget. It's going to budget.
Yeah, go into budget.
Yep. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Three A has been done. 3B, emergency replacement HVAC unit. Well, you got to do what you got to do.
If I could, Mayor McNamara, members of council, I have two quick pieces of business. One would be certainly the report, which was verbally brought to you the last council meeting. And as per procurement policy, we are obligated to bring back a report to council identifying the issue and also the source of funding. So that's what the report is this evening. So if I could read the recommendation that report number PRS 2021-17, emergency replacement HVAC unit, Public Works, Water Administration be received, and that the Public Works Water Administration Building HVAC unit emergency replacement as outlined in report PRS 2021-17 in the amount of 20,000 net of refundable HST be authorized for funding from the building and life cycle reserve. That would be my first piece of business.
Okay. Council's pleasure. Moved by Councillor Altenhoff, supported by Councillor Houston. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried.
And my second would be quick. I would just like to take the opportunity. I would like Mr. Walecki to turn on his camera. I'd like to introduce council to our newest member of the administrative team in the Community and Recreation Services Department, Mr. Dan Walecki, who is now officially on site. He's been here for a little over a week. He's our manager of facility and energy management. These type of reports will come through Dan's division in the future. And I wanted council to have the opportunity to meet Dan, see Dan's face. And this is Dan's first council meeting in Tecumseh.
Well, that's quite a barn burner for him to be on his very first meeting. Usually they're not this long, Mr. Walecki, so you'll have to, but certainly on behalf of myself, council, welcome aboard. I did get a chance to meet you the other day, and looking forward to working with you closely on our buildings and our facilities. But in particular with with climate change and so forth, especially on the energy side, we're looking forward to working with you.
Oh, thank you. And just hello to members of council as well. I'm definitely excited to be a part of the management team and look forward to working closely with administration and members of council and moving important objectives forward. Tecumseh, as you already know, has many attributes that make it a place for people to want to live, invest, and play in. And I intend to focus on furthering those qualities reflective of my area of responsibility that integrate and yet support the town's vision. So,
Excellent. Welcome aboard.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anthony. All right, development services. We have consent agreement for 11-945 Intersection Road. And so I'll call upon our manager of planning services, summarize the report and bring forward a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Attachment 1 depicts an application for severance by Clement and Jeanette Lachance that was granted by the Committee of Adjustment in November of 2020. And you can see the severed lot is outlined in red, along with the retained lot that's outlined in green. Two of the conditions of that consent were to provide storm sewer connection to the severed lot and to provide access to it. And they have until November 27th of this year to meet those conditions, or the severance is deemed to be refused. The Lachance drain runs along the south side of Intersection Road. And because of that, the culvert and driveway access that they need to install is subject to the Ontario Drainage Act. And the storm drainage connection cannot be put in until that access culvert is constructed. So due to the timelines associated with that Drainage Act process, they will not be able to install the access culvert in time to meet the consent deadline. So in order to address this discrepancy, administration worked with the town solicitor to develop a consent agreement and give the applicants an option of entering into this agreement that would ensure that the access culvert and storm sewer connection are installed prior to a building permit being issued, but allowing for the severance to be completed within that year timeframe, or by the November 27th, 2021 deadline. And that agreement will be registered against title to ensure that if the lands change hands and a new owner takes over, they're aware of the responsibilities related to the cost associated with the installation of that culvert. So the recommendation in this report, Mr. Mayor, is that bylaw 2021-87, which is on the council agenda tonight, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a consent agreement between the corporation of the town of Tecumseh and Clement Lachance and Jeanette Laura Bernadette Lachance, which facilitates the future construction of an access culvert across the municipal drain on the property located at 11945 Intersection Road in order to satisfy conditions 6 and 7 of consent application B0920, satisfactory and form to the town solicitor be adopted, and that the execution of such further documents as are called for by the consent agreement approved above, including but not limited to the execution of the acknowledgement direction required to register the consent agreement on title to the lands and such other acknowledgements, directions for any related transfers or real property registrations contemplated by the consent agreement by the mayor and clerk be authorized.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Any questions or comments on the report? Deputy Mayor Becchetti.
Thank you, your mayor. Through you, Chad, just a question for information. When is the property zone agricultural that's being severed?
Yes, yes, it is.
So my question then is, I don't know if there's been a policy change or not, but don't you have to have like so many acres before you can sever? Because I know there's always that question. I get calls all the time, and you know, whether they live on Malden or whatnot, they ask if they can sever their land and they're told no, policies changed. The, agricultural policy is very strict. You can't sever, but yet I see this happening. I don't know if it falls under something else, just so that I can better understand the situation on how these are happening and others are told they can't.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Becchetti. This property is actually in it's in the future development designation. It's part of the Tecumseh Hamlet secondary planning area. The property that is being severed is actually a residential zone. The balance of the property, the retained lot, is agriculturally zoned. So for that reason, they had to get a minor variance to address the undersized lot size of the farm lot. But what allowed the committee to consider this severance was the fact that the severed lot is within a band of residential zoning. So there's a tier of residential zoning on the south side of Intersection Road.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Then on the motion, moved by Councilor Dowie and Councilor Houston, support. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that motion carries. Okay, Madam Clerk, bylaws.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have two bylaws on the agenda this evening. One is to approve execution of the consent agreement with the Lachance, as just was reported on. And the second is to formally approve the internet and telephone voting methods for the 2022 municipal and school board elections, as reported on at the last meeting of council. We're respectfully asking for first and second readings of these bylaws, and if appropriate, third and final.
All right. Councilor Houston, Councilor Tonio, two readings, sorry. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Third and final reading are in order. Councilor Altenhoff and Councilor Houston. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. Okay, unfinished business. See none. New business. Motions. Any notices of motions? None. All right, then I need a confirmatory bylaw 2021-89 bylaw to confirm the proceedings of our meeting this evening. Councillor Altenhoff and Councillor Tonio. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Next meeting. Tuesday, November 16th, we have 4 p.m. special council meeting, 22 budget deliberations. That would be on Tuesday, November 23rd. And that's the follow-up. Excuse me, and at 6:15, a special council meeting. And 7 o'clock, a regular council meeting. I got a tickle here. All right, there's nothing further. Members of council, adjournments in order. Councilor Altenhoff, Deputy Mayor Becchetti. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. And with that, I want to certainly thank council, administration, our delegations, those streaming from home. It's been a long meeting this evening, but certainly appreciate all of your indulgence. And so I bid you a good night, and until we meet again, stay safe.